Hey guys, I haven't talked to you since election night, so the one word I have to say uh, to summarize the events that have happened since election night is damn. That is what I have to say. I mean, my God. Uh, Once again, just like 2016, the polls completely got it wrong. And I'll admit, I went by the polls and I'm like, oh my God, Trump is going to get blown out. This isn't going to be close. And I was wrong. It was much closer than I anticipated because I stupidly listened to the pollsters like Nate Silver and all those other idiots. Um, I trusted them again, so I won't be trusting them anymore. But I also don't believe the Republican uh, hacks that are going on about voter fraud this and voter fraud that and blah, 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 because a lot of their proof and their allegations have been proven false. That's just true. Like they keep saying, oh, in I think it was Philadelphia, they wouldn't let poll watchers into the polling places. No, they had Democrats and Republicans in these polling places, and the people that weren't let in were protesters, not poll watchers. Protesters. You have to meet certain qualifications to be a poll watcher. You can't just be a random person on the street and be a poll watcher. You have to meet certain qualifications to be a poll watcher. So, there's all this misinformation out there. There was this one chart or graph from 538 that, which I think is Nate Silver's thing, that was from Wisconsin that showed Joe Biden getting a bump ahead of Donald Trump at a certain time of day or something like that. And 538 had to come out and say, no, this doesn't prove a conspiracy. You can't use this to prove that that there's like some wacky conspiracy that the Democrats, that like all these Democratic ballots were used to give Joe Biden an advantage. You can't say that. And even the guy that posted these graphs to show that came out and said, you know what? I was wrong. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have used this as evidence. This really isn't credible. I was wrong. But of course, the MAGA people had to use this as confirmation bias to confirm what they already believed, which is that, oh, voter fraud and blah, blah, blah. And then you have the president and the president's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, going out and making all of these allegations. And, oh, it's just so stressful and so frustrating because now they're taking it to the courts, and the courts are being overwhelmed by all this stuff because they've got better things to do than to look into these stupid cases that are basically they're baseless, and they're going to get thrown out, and the Trump administration is going to cry bias again. And so, I mean, good God. So the copium is running rampant in the Republican Party, possibly worse than it was with the Democrats in 2016. Because believe me, the copium levels were high in 2016 with the Democrats because they were behind the whole Russiagate thing, which, although there is a teeny weeny little bit of truth in Russiagate, in the sense that it turns out that Russia did try to meddle in our elections, the impact that it had was negligible at best. So the media hyped this up for nothing, and Mueller found very little evidence of anything and indicted very few people. He found virtually nothing, especially not on Trump, So just very little to go on with the Russiagate thing, and now the Republicans are doing the same thing with this voter fraud thing and the Hunter Biden stuff, and just so I haven't looked into the Hunter Biden thing very closely, so I'm not going to go too much on that because I really don't even know something about a laptop or whatever with some sort of damning info with like corruption and stuff like that. Now, of course, do I buy that Hunter Biden is corrupt? Of course I do. But the Trumps need to look in a mirror in terms of corruption. They have no right to talk in terms of accusing other people of corruption. Everybody in D.C. is corrupt. I don't give a shit what the Trumps say. Everybody is, including them. So anyway, but the Republican copium is really, really high. The levels of copium are really ridiculously high right now. And the point is, it reminds me, it's very reminiscent of what happened in 2016, if not worse. So, with the Democrats. So it's just, I find it ironic that the Republicans are doing the exact same thing that they made fun of the Democrats for just 4 years ago. And I agreed with the Republicans when they made fun of the Democrats for being hysterical about the Russiagate thing. I agreed, and so did Kyle Kulinski, Glenn Greenwald, Abby Martin, Jimmy Dore. These were all people that obviously are not Republicans, but they were like, yeah, we agree with the Republicans that this is insane. This is, largely baseless stuff that has just been way overblown and is nuts. But now all of a sudden, when it's their guy, Trump, and he lost an election, now they're doing everything they can to make it seem like, oh no, this is rigged, and he's actually the winner, and they're just, again, they're coping, they're overdosing on copium right now. So anyway, that's what's been going on since I last saw you guys, and as you can see, I'm just my head hurts, my brain hurts from all this craziness that's been going on. But what I wanted to talk about today is a topic that was brought up by somebody that I reference quite a bit on my channel, that I've referenced quite a bit on my channel so far. Vosh. I'm not going to play you what he said, but because he has an entire video on this topic, but basically he makes fun of lefties for not being able to distinguish between liberals and fascists. And I completely disagree with that. See, I think Vosh just doesn't understand. I think he disagrees on who's a liberal and who's a fascist, and therefore he would disagree with me, for instance, that I think Biden, because he would say Biden's just a liberal. No, I think Biden is a fascist along with Trump. Now, he's less of a fascist than Donald Trump, but he still is a fascist. Like I said, voting for the lesser of two fascists still enables fascism, and Biden is absolutely a fascist. I think that, let me give you an example. I'm able to distinguish between liberalism and fascism. I think Bernie Sanders, for instance, Bernie Sanders is a liberal. He's not a fascist. I think Jeremy Corbyn is pretty much a liberal. He's not a fascist. I think AOC is a liberal, not a fascist. So I'm able to distinguish. I don't think she's an actual democratic socialist. Um, I don't necessarily think she's even a principled social democrat, because again, she's very weak and she caves to Nancy Pelosi every chance she gets, just like Bernie. They're very weak and they cave. So they're basically liberals, but they're not fascists. Um, Now Pelosi kind of dabbles in fascism every now and then, but she's kind of like she kind of teeters on the edge of liberalism and fascism. But Biden is definitely a fascist, and Trump is absolutely a fascist. And it's funny how liberals and conservatives will both say, "What? Trump's not a fascist. What are you talking about?" He absolutely is a fascist. Now, I think what people the the what turns people off when you say Trump is a fascist is they conflate all fascism with Adolf Hitler, because Hitler has been lumped in with fascists, rightfully so, because Hitler himself was a fascist. But Hitler kind of created his own branch of fascism with Nazism. Nazism was its own thing. It definitely was fascist in nature, but I will admit it was its own thing. It was its own entity in itself that definitely had a fascist element to it. So, so Hitler, yes, Hitler was a fascist, but that doesn't mean that I'm comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, and I think that is a stretch when people say that. In my sort of liberal phase, I did make that comparison briefly, but I will admit now fully that is a stretch to compare Trump to Hitler. But Hitler was not the only fascist. Benito Mussolini, Pinochet, Allende, these were fascists. There's multiple examples of fascists throughout history. Batista in Cuba, Batista. These are examples of fascists. It's not just Adolf Hitler. Anyway, so that's what I want to talk about today, is why both the Republicans and the Democrats should be called overall. I think Bernie Sanders and AOC and people like that, I think they are liberals, but a good chunk of the Democratic Party and basically all of the Republican Party deserve to be called fascists. I'm going to make that case in this video today. But before I do that, I want to show a video, because there's a misconception that I addressed in one of my earlier videos. There's a misconception out there that, both parties have gone to their opposite extremes. Well, yeah, the Republicans have gone far right, but the Democrats have gone far left. Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious. Well, we're going to take a look at a video to listening to somebody that actually knows what they're talking about on that. And we're going to see if that's actually true. And we're also going to take a look at evidence backing up why I think both parties deserve to be called fascist parties. So, if you will, join me on the journey into taking a deeper dive into the crazy world of fascism.
As extreme as the political spectrum is right now in the US, there's still almost complete uniformity on the war on terror, the stance toward Latin America, sanctions on Iran, and there's really no anti-war candidate, despite popular opinion agreeing on that. Why can no candidate touch that?
The spectrum is broad, but in an odd sense. The spectrum is basically from center to extreme right, way off the spectrum. So the Republican Party about 20 years ago basically abandoned any pretense of being a normal political party. In fact, distinguished, respected conservative commentators from the American Enterprise Institute, right-wing think tank, like Norman Ornstein, described the Republican Party as a radical insurgency, which has abandoned parliamentary politics. They just don't want anything to happen. Their only policies are don't do anything or bomb. And that's not a political party. It's what happened is that the party, during the whole neoliberal period, both parties shifted to the right, as everywhere in the world, and the Republicans just went off the spectrum. They became so dedicated to the interests of the extreme wealthy and powerful that they couldn't get votes. So they had to turn to other constituencies, which are there, but were never politically mobilized. Christian evangelicals, nativists who are afraid they're taking our country away from us, people who are so terrified that they have to carry a gun into a coffee shop, and that's their base, essentially. And when you look at just take a look at the primaries. I mean, any candidate who has a semblance of rationality is not even competing. So that's the Republicans. The Democrats have shifted to the right as well. Today's mainstream Democrats are pretty much what used to be called moderate Republicans. Somebody like Eisenhower, for example, would be considered way out on the left. So, for example, Eisenhower strongly made it very clear, as he put it, that anyone who questions the programs of the New Deal is just not part of American political life. Well, by now, that's a left-wing program. It's basically Bernie Sanders' program.
So I just wanted to pause it for a second. So for those that don't know, this is Noam Chomsky, and I have some issues with Noam Chomsky in terms of how he's been the last few years in terms of apologetics for Joe Biden, and sort of sanitizing his record, just like Vosh and Zanderhal, and making it seem like he's so much better than Donald Trump. But in this case, this was as the 2016 race was going on, and this video here. And in this case, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely correct in this case. This notion that, oh yeah, well the Republicans are far right, but the Democrats are far left is just insane. Absolutely insane. Not even close. Not even close to reality. Noam Chomsky is exactly right. Bernie is at best a centrist. Not at best, but at most a centrist. The furthest quote unquote left you can say he is the center. It's insane to me that people can say he's far left, or even somebody again like AOC or Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. I mean, these people, you heard Noam Chomsky say, people like Bernie Sanders, they're essentially no different from Dwight Eisenhower, who was a Republican. And, 60 years ago, Eisenhower, or less than 70 years ago, Eisenhower expanded the New Deal programs, expanded Social Security, raised taxes on the rich, invested in the interstate highway system, invested in infrastructure, basically. And that's basically what Bernie Sanders' program is. And if Eisenhower were around today, they'd be calling him radical left. I mean, they'd be painting him as some radical communist socialist. I mean, my God, but Eisenhower was a Republican, and back then, at the time, even during a Cold War, this was considered reasonable, common sense. Like, yeah, sure. Yeah. He said, Noam Chomsky said, that Eisenhower said, hey, if you don't support the New Deal programs, you're just not American, and again, let me repeat that. This is during the Cold War, when any semblance of similarities between us and the Soviet Union was obviously very, very much frowned upon. But even Dwight Eisenhower was like, what am I supposed to do? We got to care about each other. We got to have some sort of state-funded programs, So even Dwight Eisenhower, again, a Republican, was like, yeah, we got to fund these programs. And if you don't agree with that, you just don't care about your fellow Americans. And that's really sad. So, my God, how the Republican Party has changed. I mean, even most Democrats wouldn't have the guts to take that position today. If you listen to the Democrats, no matter what the Republicans say, if you actually listen to what the Democrats say, they'll run from these positions at every opportunity. If you listen to them, except for maybe Bernie, although sometimes he runs from this as well. If you listen to Bernie, if you listen to the Democrats, most of them will say, it's all about how much do we want to cut Social Security? How much, it's either about keeping it the same or how much do we want to cut it? It's all about either we preserve Obamacare or maybe we do a public option, but it's usually let's just keep Obamacare in place. It's not like these are all crazy, just crazy right-wing positions. These are not left positions. But again, Noam Chomsky's point is the Republicans have gone so far to the right that they're off the spectrum. And so, of course, anything the Democrats propose is going to seem like, quote unquote, far left to them because the Republicans have gone off the spectrum to the right. So it's unbelievable. So that's why I say all the time, if you are somebody that identifies, as a voter, if you are somebody that identifies as quote unquote center right, that basically means, and I know what that means to voters. That basically means, I agree more with the Republicans, slightly more with the Republicans than I do the Democrats. What you're basically saying is, I'm pretty, in an abstract sense, you're basically saying I'm pretty far right, So I know what most Americans think they're saying is I'm basically slightly right of center, but no, what you're actually saying is you're pretty far right. So it's just insane how far right the Republicans are. And as Noam Chomsky said, basically all the Republicans have wanted to do for the past, 20, 30 years is bomb shit and obstruct the Republicans at every opportunity. Or, I'm sorry, obstruct the Democrats at every opportunity. That's what they did to Obama, So, except, of course, on the areas where Obama agreed with them, like deregulating Wall Street and shit like that. So, anyway, uh, I'll let Noam continue for a few more minutes because he gets into things like war and stuff like that. So,
That's Eisenhower. So the spectrum just is, it's true that it's broad, but in a very strange sense. As far as anti-war candidates are concerned, you have to ask what it means. So, for example, Obama is considered an anti-war candidate. He described the Iraq War as a mistake, a strategic blunder, as he put it. I mean, that's like Russian generals in Afghanistan in the early 1980s who criticized the invasion as a strategic blunder. That's not criticism of the war, it's saying you're making a mistake. The debate about the Obama's is running a global terror program of a kind that has never been envisioned before, the drone program. It's now being discussed to an extent because of recent leaks, but the questions that are being raised overwhelmingly, I mean, not by Jeremy Scale and Glenn Greenwald, but by most of those who are talking about it, is are you killing too many civilians? What about just assassinating people because you think someday they might want to harm you? I mean, suppose, for example, that Iran was murdering people in the United States because they think, with some reason, that they might want to harm them. For example, the editors of the New York Times and the Washington Post, who publish articles, op-eds, calling for bombing of Iran. So suppose they said, well, this is an imminent threat, let's kill them. Would we accept that? The idea that we have the right to use force and violence at will is accepted pretty much across the spectrum.
Yep. So, as usual, Noam Chomsky is basically correct. And so his point there is people say this about Trump too. They try to paint Trump as some anti-war guy, and whoops, I gave away the surprise. But anyway, they try to paint Trump and Obama as some anti-war candidate, but anti-war president rather. But guys, I hate to tell you this, both Obama and Trump were full of shit when they campaigned against war. Both of them escalated tensions in and wars in the Middle East substantially. They like, for instance, Trump increased Obama's drone program 432%. He did 432% more drone strikes than Barack Obama, who increased drone strikes under Bush. So, I mean, these people are not anti-war presidents. Fox News to this day paints Barack Obama as, ooh, he was so soft and he was so bullshit. Now, what Fox News is salty about is in a few of his speeches, Barack Obama did some vague references where he apologized for war crimes that America committed. Oh, boo-hoo. Boo-hoo. God forbid we actually atone for killing innocent civilians. Boo-hoo. But here's the thing, Fox. I don't give a shit what what Obama said. I care about what he did. And the fact is that Barack Obama is a goddamn war criminal, and so is Donald Trump. So both of them have corpse after corpse behind them. They have blood on their hands, and they are by no means anti-war presidents. So just, I hate when they frame Barack Obama and Donald Trump like that. But anyway, let me get to what I really wanted to get to today. This is why I wanted to. This is why I call both the Democrats and the Republicans fascist parties. There is this guy, Umberto Eco. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but a while ago he published 14 common features of fascism. And Umberto actually grew up under Mussolini's fascist regime. And so he would know, I guess, what fascism is. So he says there's 14 typical features of fascism. And so basically he says that even one is enough for them to be present. So one of these present is enough to allow fascism to coagulate in the country. So, to a degree, both parties talk about the cult of tradition. Now, it is more the Republicans that emphasize this, but to some degree, the Democrats do this too, where they talk about the founders, and they have this idealized portrait of certain founders. They don't necessarily talk about, I mean, not necessarily the founding fathers, but they'll whitewash the history of other historical figures that were involved in shaping this nation, and they will use them as like, no, well, these were the real heroes, and they'll look up to them as who we should be looking up to. So the Democrats have their own cults of tradition, just as the Republicans do. It's just slightly different. I guess that's my point. Rejection of modernism, I guess to a degree, the Republicans do this. The Democrats don't necessarily do that. So Joe Biden certainly doesn't do this. So, but definitely to a certain extent, Trump does this, but he also talks about like Western civilization and stuff like that. So, that's an iffy one. But the cult of action, the like calls to action and things like that. Trump definitely does that, and Biden also does calls for action. So, yep. Disagreement is treason. Not necessarily. Trump did say that he wanted to. I mean, not that this is treason necessarily, but Trump did say that he wanted to ban flag burning and that people that do flag burning should get a year in jail. So maybe that could qualify. And as for Joe Biden, he wants to be able to spy on all Americans. So, So if you say something that the government happens not to like, you could get in trouble for, ostensibly for committing treason against the government. So, maybe. Definitely fear of difference for both Trump and Biden. So Trump we don't need to necessarily get into because that's pretty self-explanatory with Trump scapegoating others. But, maybe I will give a few examples. Basically, M&Ms, Mexicans and Muslims for sure. And also he's increasingly hard on black people. And with Joe Biden, same, black people. He wrote the 1994 crime bill. So, yep, that is definitely a common thread between Biden and Trump. Appeal to social frustration. Yep, both of them do that. The obsession with a plot. Biden doesn't necessarily do this, but Trump absolutely. We're seeing it right now. With that there's this nefarious plot. There's like the deep state. Now there's the plot to rig the election against him. Contempt for the weak. Yep, both of them have that. Trump and Biden are the ultimate elitists, and here, what's his name again? Benito Echo or something like that? Umberto Eco says, elitism is a typical aspect of any reactionary ideology, and despite what Trump tries to portray to the world, sorry about that, thirsty today. Despite what Trump tries to present to the world, he is definitely an elitist. He may not be a cultural elitist, but he is definitely a financial elitist in the fullest sense of the word. So, of the term. So, everybody is educated to become a hero. Heroism. I think this is basically just saying, everybody's educated to become a hero. Heroism is the norm. Cult of death. What's funny, Vosh does say that the Republican Party is a death cult. I don't know if this necessarily... Well, in terms of rampant militarism, I would say this applies to both Trump and Biden. In terms of they constantly... Like, look what Biden has been doing. His strategy to appeal to the military. Like, he's ending every speech now with God bless America and God bless our troops. So this is definitely a fascistic tactic, and just this obsession with militarism and trying to appeal to the troops, which I guess would also follow into machismo and weaponry. Well, actually, no, because this talks about disdain for women, because this is more disdain for women and intolerance of homosexuality. That's more a Trump thing than a Biden thing. So technically, Biden doesn't do number 12, but this is definitely Donald Trump for sure. But selective populism, yep. This is definitely Trump and Biden. Yep. Selected group of citizens that can be presented and accepted as the voice of the people, yep. And fascism speaks newspeak, fascist school books. It's funny how Donald Trump, he gave a speech saying that if he was elected to a second term, he would basically force schools to teach like right-wing PC history, where everything would be a sanitized version of American history that would always portray American history as a story of America being the good guy, essentially. So the point that I want to show here is, number one, that Trump is definitely a fascist, but again, Joe is slightly less fascistic, but still pretty damn fascistic. So, again, my point to people like Vosh is, just because you're slightly less fascistic than Donald Trump doesn't mean you're not a fascist. So, anyway, that is basically all I have for you today, and I will see you guys next time. Until then, take care.